Hey folks, Reloading Bench back with you again. Following my attempt to get this particular mechanical 3D printed device to work on my Hornady lock and load, I ran into a couple hurdles, tried to work around some, but one of the biggest challenges was just the stress that was placed in this one particular area anytime this would move. And it got to a point where it moved enough and actually did crack. So I tried gluing and didn't do anything. But when I made my fail video, the printer and designer of this had some thoughts and sent me a couple of replacement parts to see how they would work. So I thought I'd show those to you because I think they warrant definite discussion because I think they're excellent improvements in all honesty. So this is one of them. So when I first got mine, I had to sand this down because the printing left a little nib on there and it wouldn't travel easily. And I also noticed that this was quite rougher than this, and definitely rougher than this. This is really nice here. It's too bad the whole print doesn't print like this, but he sanded this down, and that's a much nicer sanding than even I did. I got it smooth, but I didn't get it as smooth as this, so kudos in that sense. But the real, I think, major change, and I had put some grease in here to try and help things along. This moves quite nicely, as the other one did. This is relatively smoother than the other one I had. But the big difference is on the back. This brace that is now part of the unit that this unit, the original unit, did not have. And you can see that that whole area, once it's mounted here, this is a weak point because of the amount of material in here. But I can't say enough. I think kudos, major kudos, because once this is mounted, this should be rock solid because of where this sits, how big it is, to the point of maybe not even needing that little, gosh, I don't even know what it was called. I'll pause the video and break that out and show you what I'm going to do there. All right, so I'll call this the stabilizer or the boot. And on the original unit, I had it in there. And what I had done was I did some smallest C-clamps I could find, and I was essentially clamping each side to the edge of my bench area. And I think what I'm going to do for this round, because it's so hard to get that on there, and even when you do, it's only half covered. So my thought was I would take a piece of scrap oak. Obviously this is just the initial size, so I'll cut it down to size. Sink that in and mount this boot, the stabilizer, to the wood with nuts and bolts. So I'll countersink and have that. And then what I'll do is I'll probably have the C-clamp holding down the wood to the bench as opposed to trying to hold on to the stabilizer. So that's the plan. Again, I can't say enough. I think this was a huge improvement to the design. I was sold on the design, which is why I bought it. I like the idea of a small, compact, mechanical version of the case feeder without going through a big electronic, cumbersome, loud thing. And this almost got there for me, and I think nice changes to this. So kudos, stay tuned, and we'll see how it looks mounted and how it functions. For the background noise, landscaping, little off tripod action. I wanted to try and do this piece by piece and rig things up to emulate how it's going to work before I finalized the build. My first challenge was because of this new bracket, which is phenomenal, and when I show you on tripod what a difference this makes. In order to keep or retain my dual bin inline fab mount, I had to go to essentially, I think, 4 or 5 washers above and below in order to mount this. That's in there pretty solid. So I'll put this on tripod and you can see how things are working up to this point with my pseudo bullet feeder. Change I had to make when I swapped in this piece from the original pieces that were given to me. I noticed that if I had this any farther forward, it was hitting this tube. As you can hear it a little bit right there. And I'm wondering if that's where the jerky motion was previously on the original piece, and I didn't catch it and assumed it was part of this. But this was definitely an issue in the previous instance. But as you can see now, very fluid, no jerky, no lubrication needed. There is no grease on there. I did put one washer in front of this to give this about a tad bit of spacing so that this doesn't rub, but otherwise that is pretty stock. So it looks like things are going well. I'll finish building out the top and see how the rest of it wants to cooperate. Okay, so I went ahead and mounted the tube feeder, and that's relatively stable as long as I don't try to operate it with one hand in terms of twist, because that's the only bolt holding it up. I've got a nut on the bottom, the top, and then underneath here as well for stability. I also recut a new tube because the one that shipped with it was half cut, and the brass just seemed to bounce around a little too much for my preference. But again, as I'm putting each piece together progressively upwards, I'm dry testing. So there's about 4 shells. I've got number of dies removed, powder's gone, powder cop or the lockout, powder lockout, and then obviously resizing because it's just getting to be a pain in the butt. And I'm going to attribute all the naturally the one die I don't take out is the one that wants to hit. The all of the plastic is brand new, so it's going to have a little static electricity to it. And all die's gone. So let's try, and I've totally destroyed this spring, this retention spring over the last few days with the original one as well as this one, so I'll be replacing that. Alright, so there's 3. Again, working my way up, assuming I've got tubes connected. And I'll put that 4th one back in. Folks, here is the finished product. I'll do a little scan so you can see the entire footprint. And right now I'm using the Lee included shell collator as opposed to the one that was 3D printed. We'll see which one works better over time. The biggest challenge I have now is the tubes for the casings are newish, so they stick a little bit, and it's going to take a little while to get that worked in. But I'll flip the tripod around and then you'll get a close-up of what's happening, and I'll probably pull out some dies so that you can see things without interruption. Alright, while I'm pulling out a few dies, we'll take out the lockout die, powder die, bullet feeding die, which is in there pretty good. and the seating die. Can't say enough about the brace. In fact, as I was rethinking things about doing the little wood addition, which if I can find the piece, if I was going to do the wood addition, I would have done something like this with the boot. Ouch. Tight, cramped area. With the boot. And in all honesty, after really looking at this, I think the boot was absolutely required with the other version. But with this brace, I mean, there's absolutely zero movement here. Zero. And I don't believe the boot's going to add that much for the complexity of trying to implement it. So what I found that works great is that I'm actually using the handle to give it a little tap. And again, I'm going to assume that's, you know, new plastic, needs to work itself in. The little jar of the handle helps the brass come down, seat quite nicely. No issues. No issues whatsoever. When I even had the dies in, everything except the powder cup, it cycled quite nicely through the dies as well. So I say this is absolutely 100% a success now, and a very elegant solution to implementing a mechanical case feeding option without having to go down the path of the loud, expensive, cumbersome, and electronic version of the Hornady. Not so much bashing it, just not what I wanted to do. Plus, this fits the bench, fits the press, and it's got a very, very small footprint compared to something so much larger and much more complex. So this worked out quite well. Can't say enough about the brace. Made a world of difference, and appreciate the second chance to make this work. And I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. And my only concern now is going to be sorting brass to make sure that I've got large primer pockets, so that I'm not having to look at brass. But I changed the spring. Everything's golden and works like a charm. So 2 thumbs up, and absolute great implementation, especially after the addition of the bar. So kudos. Thanks all.